Wheels turning. Boom! I am live with Jason Carr from GMT and also very well known GMT One, along with development and soon to come design. You can see a little peek. We'll be talking about Fields of Fire. I've got a story on mine, and I have backed the P500 for the deluxe upgrade kit as well. But why don't you put us in place and time? I know where you are, where you're at, but why don't you let the viewers know where you're coming in from?
Yeah, I'm calling in from Colorado Springs, Colorado. So lived here for about 5 years, and we just love living up in the mountains. And you might hear some racket because I got 4 kids, so they are always running back. I'm gonna check, just make sure that door's locked.
There you go. Good racket. Yeah, they'll come in. Hey.
Yeah, just like that guy on CNN.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, and I've been so like I said, live here in Colorado Springs. There's a good gaming community here. I had a game night last night with some guys who played Return to Dark Tower from Restoration Games. So nothing like a 20-inch mechanized Bluetooth tower that's tormenting you to really set the mood for the evening. And but get some more games in here too. And there's got a good group here that I play with. Play a little bit of everything. So, and then I've been with GMT, for 7 years, I think. And I've been director of game development there for about 3. So yeah.
Beautiful. Love it. Yeah. So great. Now, some folks know I grew up in Evergreen, Colorado. It's north and then up into the mountains, but not far. My dad still got his house there, but love the Springs. Pikes Peak, if nobody knows, I've gone down and hiked that with some buddies before. So the marathon they run at the Pikes Peak, I did not know. And we got there and they're like, you guys are here just in time. The marathon's going to come, like 2 days from now. You better go up now. And we were like, oh my God, I had no idea people ran that thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when we moved here, I found out people ran up the mountain, and I was just kind of like, what, why would you do that? And there's an incline here, Manitou Incline, which is basically just like a very steep hill that they stuck railroad ties into so that you have footing so that you can like run up the side of the mountain if you want to. Again, no idea why people would do that. But then my favorite thing was we lived here for a little while, and I found out there's a race, like a car race up the side of Pikes Peak.
Yes.
And I've driven up Pikes Peak, and I go like 5 miles an hour because I don't want my car to fall off the side of the hill. And I found out there's people who race that thing.
Yeah. And they're like drifting around corners and
craziness.
stuff.
So yeah. So, Colorado takes all kinds.
That is, they've got this beautiful halfway spot when you're hiking up to that you can even spend the night in. And I love it. It's awesome. So
great.
Let's see. We've got a couple areas. We are going to focus on some solo play. We'll talk even a little bit about RPG, and we may touch on Purple Haze. But one area where we were going to even start on was some of the history. I've got little crib notes over here of GMT One. And I know that's, is it fair to say that's kind of your baby, or would that be me taking it too far?
Yeah, it's my baby. It was my idea, my baby. So
okay, there we go.
I think everybody at this point has heard me talk. If you've heard me talk before, you've heard me talk about kind of how I got into design, which it really owes to Mike Berticelli, who designed Tank Duel. And Mike kind of brought me along in understanding what's game development, and watching him go through the process of design was really interesting. And I wrote an article for C3I about this, kind of what does a developer do? But what that didn't touch on was the other half of what I did with Mike, which was designing the solitaire system for Tank Duel. And originally that just started out because we wanted something in the box for people who play solo. We didn't expect we were making something that was going to be really great or anything. I think we thought, hey, people will have fun with this. It's cheap to add. It adds value. Let's do it. And it turns out people really like it. And so there's a pretty dedicated set of players who play the game just solo, and that's it. And so every time we do a new expansion or a new tank pack or whatever, we're always thinking about how do we make every scenario work for the guys who play solo. And that was something that I think was a little bit different because we now lead with solo design. So when we are sitting down and talking about like what's the next tank pack, it's a given that solo is in that. And we don't come around at the end and say, how are we going to put solo on this? That seems like a thing we should do. And when I talked shortly after I did Tank Duel, I started working on Gandhi with Bruce Mansfield, and Bruce and his brother Scott, who was doing a lot of the development at that point, were exactly the same. They had a game that was like a good prototype, solid, ready for P500 game. And Bruce was already talking about, we need to make sure that solo is baked into this from the beginning. It needs to be something that's part and parcel of the game. And that comes from Bruce knowing that he played solo a lot, but it also came from the fact that the game started out. Gandhi started out as a game entry in a solo war game print and play challenge on Board Game Geek.
Really?
So yeah, you can go back and find posts of like old versions of the game where it was just a solo game, and you played as the Indian Congress, and everything else was, or maybe you played as the Ross. I don't remember who you play as, but it's a solo game, and you're just trying to figure out how to keep India from descending into chaos while you play through. And so he wanted to continue to have that fidelity to his original vision, and that led to the bots that he put into Gandhi. So both of those conversations made me think, man, solo coming as an afterthought is a really bad idea. It needs to be something that's built up front and understood from the not necessarily from the very beginning of the game, but early in the design process. We need to be talking about how are we going to support solitaire play for this and have a plan. And sometimes that plan is going to be, this game's perfect for just doing a solo system at the end. Sometimes that plan is going to be, we're going to change the design so that solo play is easier. And I think knowing that is a big win. And so I went to Gene and said, I got this idea. And we talked about it for about 6 months, and he helped me kind of workshop it to get it to where I wanted it to be. And we put 2 games kind of through this process of solitaire dedicated development, where we got people who know how solitaire games are supposed to work and are specifically solo fans working on games that designers had solo systems for. One of those was Space Corp Ventures.
Sure.
So that game doesn't say GMT One on the box, but I developed it, and Scott Mansfield was my lead playtester for that. And he probably played, I don't know, he probably played like 60 games solo. Wow. And that game should honestly have GMT One on it. It just doesn't, because we sent it to the printer right before we announced it. So that was great. And then the other one was Tank Duel North Africa, which we put through the same kind of rigor with the solitaire system, and super cool, fun to do. So that's kind of how GMT One got started. Today, GMT One does 4 things. We support solo designers who are making solo specific games like Fields of Fire, and Mr. President.
Right. Gene's game.
Gene's game, yep. And then we do bot design for games that are multiplayer games that want to have a solo system in the box. So good example of that would be Flashpoint South China Sea, which just came out. So this has a solitaire system in the box that I designed. And Harold was really gracious to let me do it. I played the game and said, this seems like a good candidate. Would you like to give it the GMT One treatment? And he was like, yes, sir, let's do it. The third thing we do is we design solitaire systems for games that have already been out or are kind of our legacy titles. So that's like the Trung bot for Fire in the Lake, or the Calixto bot for Cuba Libre. And then the last thing we do is we work with designers on figuring out ways to make their games solo accessible when they don't need a solo system. And for that, you'll have something like the CDG solo system that Ken Kuhn put together, with which Stuka Joe is the original designer of that. I don't want to miss giving him all the credit for the work that he did there.
You bet.
But Stuka Joe put together the original plan, and there's play sheets from all kinds of people. Chris Crane has done a lot of play sheets for us, and is he just understands how people approach a CDG solitaire. So, so those are the 4 things we do, and that's kind of why we exist. So, yeah.
Bill's got a question here. Bill Broadhorse. For upcoming Wolfpack, is solo system different than multiplayer, since I think it's co-op?
You know, that's a great question. So I'll answer the question, and then I have a follow-on thought for you. So good question, Bill. So the solo system is the same. You play a couple U-boats, and that's how you solo it. I think there might be a handful of rules. I haven't looked at it in a little bit, but I think there might be a handful of rules that are solo or multiplayer specific. But the game is intended, Mike's intent is that you play it the same way, solo or co-op. And that comes from Mike. Actually, if you ever go to GMT West, or you go to Concept World and you want to play a game with Mike Berticelli, one of the things that he loves to do, and I love to do, is to get some big solo game out, like Fields of Fire or Enemy Coast Ahead or Mr. President, and sit down and get a group of like 6 of you to play it together. Right. And we don't even, when Mike and I play, we don't even assign roles. We're not like, you're the Secretary of State, I'll be the Secretary of Defense. Like, we don't do that. We just make all our decisions together. But the process of sitting at the table and talking through, like, ooh, we have 2 AP left. What should we do with these? This is a hard decision. And trying to figure it out is so much fun. And it adds a ton to the game experience. So for Mike with Wolfpack, I think one of the things he's really doing there is, yes, it's a co-op game, 100% a co-op game. But it's got a lot of that vibe to it where it's like, hey, what do we do here? Like, how do we solve this problem? And you can't see past a lot of random decisions. So it's not like Pandemic where it's like, you need to play those 2 cards and move here, and that's the best turn.
Yeah, you don't end up with an alpha.
No, you can't, because there's so many rolls and card flips and things that are going to alter the situation subtly. But I think it has a lot of that vibe of like, ooh, we have 2 turns to kind of figure this out. How do we do this? What should our approach be? And it really encourages the players to negotiate together and to talk together and to coordinate their plan ahead of time. Because once they hit the convoy, I mean, all hell breaks loose and good luck.
Now, it's interesting with Mr. President, which I've been eyeing for a long time, and seeing that interest really balloon and just start to blow up and the art come out. And I've been interested in a long time. And then I started thinking, man, how complex is this? Can you give a window into that complexity?
Sure can. So I think there's 2 kinds of complexity that people run into. One is opacity. So it's like, I can't understand what my choices do. Coin games have a lot of that. The first time you sit down to play a coin game, it's easy to bump into it and go, I don't know how to do what I'm trying to do.
Right.
I love Joel Toppin's First Nation series games, Navajo Wars and Comancheria. But that's exactly how it is the first time. Every time I come back to the games after a while and I set it up, I go, wait a second, passage of time. Why do I want to use this? What's this going to do for me? And I have to kind of reload it all into my brain, because the complexity of the interactions of things is hard to understand, and it makes the game opaque. Mr. President doesn't have a ton of that. It's pretty clear what each action does, and it's mostly clear why you would want to take them, although that will trip you up from time to time. Where I've experienced Mr. President being a little more complex is the scope of the game. So with Mr. President, you have a foreign and a domestic theater that you are worried about. And within each one, I mean, foreign, you're worried about, okay, well, I've got rogue states, I've got terror groups, I've got China, I've got Russia, and they are my global peers. And so they're doing all sorts of things I'm trying to deal with. There might be civil wars that break out. There might be actual wars that break out. There might be wars that you start. I mean, you have layers and layers and layers, because if you think about what the game is, it's sitting behind the Resolute desk in the White House and trying to manage the affairs of a global superpower. And so that's modeled on the board by just the expansive scope of things that you have to do. On the domestic side, you're trying to pass legislation. You're trying to manage Congress. You might need to mudsling a little bit to get one of your congressional opponents to shut up. You're trying to figure out if you're going to get reelected. I mean, there's so much going on in the game that I think that's what overwhelms players. So one of the things GMT One does is answers questions like, how do we get our arms around that complexity?
Right.
And so a couple years ago, Gene brought Mike Berticelli into Mr. President and said, Mike, I need you to help me figure out how people are actually going to sit down and play this game. And Mike worked with David Spangler, who's one of our awesome playtesters, just incredible playtester. And he sat down with Mike and they put together a flip book. So if you've ever played D-Day at Omaha Beach or Enemy Action Ardennes, those games have flip books put on Board Game Geek where you just start at page 1 and you follow the instructions and turn the pages. And if you do everything that the thing tells you to do, you've walked through a whole turn. And then when you get to the end of the turn, you flip the book over and start back at the beginning. And you don't have to open up the rules. You don't have to go find all the charts because all the charts are reprinted in that spot. It's really nice.
Perfect.
So for Mr. President, we did a flip book. And the game, from the moment you open the box, is teaching you how to play the game. Like, I don't want to spoil stuff, but like one of the traditions in the White House is that the outgoing president leaves a letter for the incoming president. And so we took that, Gene took that as inspiration of how to get you started. Is it's like you have a letter from the outgoing president, you have briefings that were left from the outgoing president or your new staff, and then you have this flip book that walks you through a whole year. And you go through the flip book 4 times, you've played Mr. President. Wow. So I think that helps us get the complexity under control. And those kinds of ideas are not new, but applying them in new ways is super critical for us to continue to be able to have games that, I think we were talking about Ambush right before we went live, and you mentioned, man, this is like a retirement game for me because I need to be able to get into it. It's fiddly, it's got moving pieces. I love the game, I love the story it tells, but I can't just sit down and play it. And our goal with Mr. President is, hey, you have a long weekend and you really want to play something big, you can play Mr. President in that long weekend without stopping halfway.
Love it. Oh, hold on, we got a little glitch. Let me see if we still got you. Oh, there we go. We're back.
Sorry. Yeah, my internet.
It could be here too. Hey, and here's the beautiful thing is I just saw the GMT email update. Gene took the kind of near final product, handed it over to you and GMT One. You had, it doesn't name who they are, I don't believe, but you had brand new play testers skilled in solo play, handed it over to them blind. Here's the box. Go play. Tell us what doesn't work, what's not intuitive, what you like. And he was just hinting that was so interesting because you're kind of watching these play testers dive in without any pre-knowledge and just start to make things work or question things.
Yeah, I mean, and the other part is we have people who play almost exclusively hex and counter games who are doing this, and we have a couple people who are like, oh, I wouldn't touch those with a 10-foot pole, and they're doing it too, because we see the need for a lot of different perspectives, because the assumptions that you bring, the assumptions you would bring having done solo design in the past are different than the assumptions that Ken Kuhn, one of my staff developers, brings, being, an 18xx gamer and into CDGs. And that's different than what some of the other people bring. So having diverse perspectives means that we catch a lot more. And the interesting part has been, I've had 6 guys run through this game, and they've all played between 1 and 4 years of the game. And almost none of them have given me the same feedback. The feedback has been different from every one of them. They've caught different things. They've found different issues. They've had different questions, and it's awesome.
Severo Spagnolia, clever. All right. Concise. Nice. No, it looks very cool. It looks that is what's so funny is I was so into it. And until you explain kind of how it even jumps, it jumps you into a place in time by receiving that letter from the outgoing president. That's brilliant. I hadn't thought of that because I was thinking, man, where do you, where's the approachability? Where am I inserted into this as the president? But that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense because an incoming president is being inserted exactly into that situation.
Yeah. And I mean, so Saverio, who was just commenting, he's one of the designers of Vijay Nagara for GMT. Yesterday, we had a question. We were tweaking some counters in one of the cups, and Gene made a change to how the counters were going to work. And I went, oh man, the math for this is beyond me. I can't tell you what we just did mathematically. And so I came back to Sav and said, hey, you're a mathematician. Can you figure this out? And I think it took him 10 minutes, and he had a visualization. He sent me 2 videos, and he's like, this is what the cup looks like over time in option A. This is what it looks like in option B. And I was like, well, that's easy. Like, I don't have to think about this anymore. And this is the thing I love about game development is I don't have to do it all, right? I'm not great at the math part. I have some intuition, but I have friends and other people and other designers who can help me with the math when I can't do it. And, I have Joe Dewhurst who can go through and help me with the editing when I can't do that. And I just love it. So
perfect. And I had Sav on the show, and we talked about his game coming up. Yeah. So very intriguing. We had Alan here comes in with, after playing Mr. President, does your hair go gray?
Yeah, we're going to include some Just for Men in the box so that you can kind of cover it over.
That's it. All that inlaid stress. Coming in from Ohio, of course, Ron Nicholson, who used to be a neighbor of yours.
That's right. Yeah. Hey, Ron, good to see you again.
I'm even supposed to, I've got a little inside knowledge. Apparently, maybe you've recently or enjoy going to Bird Dog Barbecue.
Oh yeah, do I ever? Yeah, there's a great, Colorado's kind of at the intersection of there's a lot of people, just a ton of people move here. And so you
Right.
got the Kansas City folks, you got the Texas folks, you got the Oklahoma folks. And so we have a great barbecue scene here. I love it.
Perfect. And there's Sav just pointing out that the clever introduction of that letter in order to drop you in those first pages. Yeah, it's beautiful. Even with the briefings, you're always getting the internal. Hey, here's national security internally and externally, and threats. So that is just brilliant.
Yeah, and there's an interesting thing. Let's talk about this for a second, because that narrative is half the thing, right? You have to get people narratively engaged into the game, and that can come from, oh, I already know this topic and I love it. Like,
right.
For me, I love Normandy landings. I love reading about the Normandy landings.
Mm.
And so when I saw Normandy 44, you didn't have to like give me a life story of people who had landed on the beach for me to already be interested in the game.
Right.
But the other half is, how do you actually teach people to play the game? And so Mr. President's using a flip book. You've got Fields of Fire sitting right there. That's another great example of what GMT One is doing, and where GMT is going as a company. Is we are trying to make our games accessible to people who want to play those kinds of games. I want to be really clear, people hear what I'm saying. We're not going to water down our games. Fields of Fire is just as complex in the deluxe edition as it was in second edition. It's the same game. But what we've done is spent a whole lot of time thinking about, how would somebody learn how to play this game? So I have two developers. One's in Japan and one is in Great Britain. And they are spending just like, I don't know, their wives have to hate them at this point. Like, they are spending their entire lives, or me. Yeah, they probably have a picture of my face they throw darts at. But like, they have given countless hours to the community, and they answer questions in a Facebook group. They're on Board Game Geek. They're on Consum World. And they've written a starter guide for players to go from 0 to functionally able to play Normandy Mission 1. And Ben Hull kind of brought us the scaffolding for what that would look like. Again, Mike Berticelli was involved in this. He's everywhere. You can't escape him. But we have we had the scaffolding from Ben that was like, okay, here's how this should work. You should be an officer going through training. And the training should be, let's put you in charge of a platoon first. And let's get your platoon up to speed. So we have a platoon assault course kind of thing, where it just teaches you how to move pieces around, because that's a complicated thing in Fields of Fire. And then once you've mastered that, we move you up to kind of like the company level. And now you're a real company commander. And so it's like, okay, well, let's have a company assault course that you go through. And so that was Ben's scaffolding, the way he wanted to do it. And so over time, we've evolved that and grown it, and we've gotten tons of feedback from playtesters, and we've had 200 playtesters look at these materials. And we've had, you get 200 playtesters to look, probably 50 actually played it, but those guys gave great feedback. And we've been able to really kind of polish up what's going on. So when you open Fields of Fire Deluxe, first of all, it's going to be a nice thick 3-inch box, so you can actually put counter trays in there, which I know is a sticking point for so many people. But you're gonna see on top a starter guide, and the rules are going to say, the rule book itself is pretty big. It's a reference manual. Like, it's not going to be, it's going to have to be bound like a book, because it's not going to be a small rule book. But the point there is to provide perfect clarity. So we have much bigger pictures in it. We have a lot more illustrations and examples. And we said, people are not going to learn this game by reading the rule book. So let's not try to make it super short. Let's make it as long as it needs to be to cover everything. And then the starter guide, which is much slimmer and still has big full page illustrations and everything, is where people will go to learn the game. So the rule book says right inside the front cover, if you do not know how to play Fields of Fire, close this and put it back in the box. Because you can't learn the game from the rule book. It's not the way we're teaching you. So another thing that we are doing at GMT, not just in GMT One, but across the company, is thinking about, how do people actually learn to play our games? And in a lot of places, that's really slick, refined rule books. So coming back to Flashpoint South China Sea for a second, Harold, I can tell you, because I was there with him, Harold pored over this rule book to make sure it was utterly perfect. And if you've seen the game, it's not a GMT style rule book. It's not 11.1. It's a Euro style rulebook. It's just, here's what a turn looks like. Here's the actions you take. But he did such a great job with the rulebook. He didn't need an example of play because all the examples are just in the rules. So you want to know how something works? Go to that rule. There's a rule and there's an illustrated explanation of it. And then when we decided to do solitaire, he was like, we're not tacking solitaire onto the end of the rule book, 2 pages. Here you go. Remember how to play 2-player and then apply all these changes. He was like, I want a full, complete solo book so that if you're playing solo, you never have to touch the 2-player rules. And that has been, again, one of the best received parts of the game. And John Butterfield was the one who kind of pioneered this, right? He does that with Enemy Action, Ardennes, and Kharkov. He did it with Space Corp. Because to John's mind, I remember he was on recently and said this, he's not designing one game when he designs Enemy Action Ardennes. He's designing 3 games. They just come in the same box.
Right.
And so that's what we did with Flashpoint. It's not one game. It's 2 games. They share some rules and components, but they're in the same box.
Beautiful. Yeah, and the way this even came to me was interesting. I was at BGG, and they were doing their drawings on the Saturday at the end of the game, and I ended up winning a little bundle of games that had come from their library, and oddly enough, had never been checked out. So it's got the little library tag on it, and then I got it home. Now, one of the because I broke out the rules to read it. I got to admit, I was like, oh, I don't have time because I had 3 other games I had to get on the table and learn. And I put it back in the box. And that's why when the deluxe upgrade kit came out, I went in P500 right away because what I need is exactly what was talked about in the brief for the deluxe upgrade kit or the regular deluxe version was something that will jump me in and start walking me through right away. Because again, I get stuck sitting here thinking this looks great. One of the, I can't say it's a downside, but I've got a game on the table right now that I got to get some plays in so I can come in and do a review. And if I get stuck on something and I can't figure it out, it just goes in the box and goes away.
Yeah.
And it looked, I was so like, wow. And then I was like, uh-oh, I'm not going to be able to grok this in the amount of time I have. So as soon as that update came out on my email, I was like, whoop, there's a P500. And I noticed it was skyrocketing. Just the upgrade kit was really, I think it already hit the 500.
Oh, yeah. No, both of them.
Yeah.
Both of them did quite quickly. And it's funny because I think until I'm actually looking, until very recently, the upgrade kit had more orders than the deluxe edition because there's so many people out there who have the game and are excited. Yeah, the update kit still has more orders than the deluxe edition.
Got it.
Which, I mean, we're kind of mentally adding those together because it's all the same material. But
well, even at BGG, there were people that walked by, that saw me win the basket, and I'm breaking out these different games, and people are walking by going, "Great game! That game's so fun. A little hard to grok, but And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I remember thinking, "Wow, let me go look at this." Because again, every time when I get something, I'm always like, my first 2 games were B-17 Queen of the Skies and then Ambush. And I hit the home run on both those games because I was up in the mountains of Evergreen. It's 1983, 85-ish. There's no one I know that plays these kind of games.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go down to Denver and I wasn't, I was a kid. I would have had to get a ride from, hey, take me down to Denver. I'm going to a board game thing. So yeah, when that's going on and what GMT One's doing. Now on that note, I know we're going to jump over and I'll look at some questions here, and Fred's in as well. But let me see. Hold on, he's got
Fred's
a good
here.
Yep. but and the Consim game jam, Jason.
So for those who don't know, this weekend's the second Consim game jam, and I knew that I had this and some other commitments this weekend. So I signed up for it, but only as like an exhibitioner. Like I just did Friday night. And my project this year was to try to mash up. So the theme for the game jam is a 54 card driven game with 54 other components. And you are not permitted to have like a mounted map or a paper, like a map to actually play on. It either has to be constructed by the players as part of the game, or you have to figure something else out. So I immediately thought Fields of Fire, just because the way the map works, right? It's cards. And so I've for a long time, I've wanted to try out what it would look like to have a simpler Fields of Fire, because it's one of the things people ask for all the time. They're like, what if it was Fields of Fire, but it was like half the complexity? And so what I did was I said, well, that game already exists in terms of combat, scale, movement, action, activation. It's called Combat Commander. So what if we lifted Combat Commander and we put it into that kind of card map format? And so my project was just trying to design a 12-person squad level individual soldier counters solo game that used a Fields of Fire style map, but was really more like Combat Commander in terms of the actual mechanics and driving it. And it didn't work at all. Like, it was terrible. It was awful, but it was super fun. And that's the beauty of these game jams, is you don't generally come out of it with an idea that you're like, this is ready for a publisher. You come out of it with a whole bunch of thoughts that you go and you put to your other designs. And so I had a bunch of ideas that sparked for my designs that I'm working on, and I'm really excited to get back to them and kind of apply some of it.
Very cool. We've got Deploribus Rex. Solo modes and support for solo play are becoming essential to maximize sales these days, which is a good thing, especially, with all the illnesses, we'll call, so we don't get flagged on anything coming in. Lots of people turning to that solo play that really had never experienced, never even tried, because they had solid game groups, or they lived in big cities and they were never searching for a solo component.
Yeah, right on. And it doesn't have to be a bot, like it can be this kind of facilitated play. I'm testing the sheets for the next version of this. So right now this supports 7 games. We have 6 more that are on P500. That won't sit in P500 for long. It's easy for us to make these. The games in the new pack include Wilderness War. Well, Wilderness War is probably my favorite game. And so I haven't played it in like 3 years because global events have conspired such that I could not find an opponent. But just setting out those play sheets, just setting out the displays, having the play sheet, rolling a die to kind of limit some choices, it makes the game come back to life for me.
Nice.
And so I just love Stuka Joe's stuff that he did here. He wrote an article for Inside GMT years ago that explained what he was thinking about when he was doing this, and it just resonates with me so much. It's like solitaire players play a game to have an experience, and when you have to switch your context back and forth, you're breaking up your narrative of the experience of the game. And this system restores that narrative continuity. And so you can see the decisions that are being made at each point without having to like left brain, right brain, split yourself in half to try to play. So it's so much fun. I love this system.
We've got Bill Broadhurst here with solo modes for multiplayer games can be a great way to learn a game on your own before teaching others. Also to learn reasonable strategies, i.e. that's how I found Liberty or Death bots.
Yeah.
Very true.
Bill, that's a great point, and also speaks to one of the things that I come back to in my designs all the time. If you ever play one of my solo designs, you'll find that a turn for the player is always the same as in a 2-player game. Because I don't want you to play the solo game and then feel like you have to relearn the game to play it 2-player. It should feel different, but I want your turn, what you're doing on your turn mechanically, to be the same.
Beautiful. Now, Fred has a follow-up question. Any plans for a solo CDG pack number 3, or you feel you've covered all the main games from GMT's catalog?
So how mad do I want Ken Kuhn to be at me right now? That's the question. Do I want to tip his hand, or... I think we've been pretty clear that we have some plans for this in the future. So I'll talk about a couple things. Okay. Clash of Sovereigns, the 4-player game from Bob Kalinowski. I think that's his name. Sorry if I got that wrong, Bob. Covering the War of Austrian Secession, I want to say. That game has a play sheet in the box. So if you have this and you buy Clash of Sovereigns, you can play it solo. But it's a 4-player game, and this only comes with 2 displays, so you'll have to print out 2 more because we make it free on our website. Well, I think everybody can think of some 4- and 6-player games in the GMT catalog that might be coming out or already exist that would be great to have playsheet support for. Perhaps 1 or 2 on the Wars of Religion.
Ooh,
And
lordy,
then,
lordy.
yeah.
This is
So
what I need.
yeah, so we are going to be working on some more things for that. And then the other thing that's going on there is like we are announcing new games along with support from this.
Wow.
So Iron Storm, which just came up, World War One CDG. Um, Iron Storm is going to have a play sheet in the box. Ken's already designed it. So the game, it wasn't even on P500, and Ken had oh yeah, this is how this is going to work. Here's all the notes on how it should go.
I was going to say, like, I could hear something being nailed into a door.
Yeah,
and then Mike had some idea.
Mike, you might want to get a chair and sit down, though, buddy. Don't let your legs get tired.
Yes, this would be, wow, very nice. Holy moly. I've got a whiskey buddy that lives in the Springs, Wes Jolly, that actually gets a group together about 2 or 3 times a year and plays Here I Stand. And my story was my dad has passed, but he was a Lutheran pastor. And I was waiting for the second edition to be reprinted on the P500. And now, not that it's a sad thing, but he'd passed, and then the P500 funded and showed up, and I just put it away for a year because I was like, oh, we were going to play this together. But then even when I broke it out, I was like, wow, this is big.
Isn't it great though? It's like I tell people I love the games that are like blank in a box. Like I love War of the Ring because it is Lord of the Rings in a box, and you can get it out, you can experience the full thing. Star Wars Rebellion, love that game because it just puts me into A New Hope, like right in the middle of it. And yeah, Here I Stand is one of those.
There you go. Fred, again, Iron Storm is insanely good, by the way.
Yeah, it is a great game. Highly recommended. So glad we managed to pick that one up.
Nice. Harold here. How big is your team now, Jason? It represents a massive commitment by GMT to QC, quality control, I think, development, solo gaming.
Yeah, this is something that I have been like very noisy about to Gene, because I came to GMT via Eurogaming. And I'm not going to say that like Euro games don't have mistakes in them. They do. But we're playing games that are like super complicated. And so one of the things that I was very realistic about coming to the hobby was, yeah, there's a lot of complexity in these games. It means there's going to be errata, mistakes, rules, clarifications, things like that. But you can invest and fix a lot of that stuff. And so as a software developer, my day job, I'm dealing with the same problems. I mean, the human brain was not meant to write code. It was not. That's not where we came from. It's not what we do. We work with our hands. We relate to other people. We live in a polis. Like, we are social beings. We are not intended to stare at code all day and try to make this complexity. And so there's a lot of things in software that we do. Code review. We have automated checks. We have a lot of safeguards in how we safely deploy things so we can undo it quickly if it goes bad. And those are all developed to make safety in a space that is inherently dangerous. And as a little bit of a digression here, I would really love to recommend to people, if you're in any kind of environment where you have to do things that have risk associated with them, check out this paper called How Complex Systems Fail by, oh crud, I can't remember his name now. This is going to drive me crazy until I remember. Richard Cook. Sorry, Richard Cook. He was a researcher at University of Chicago, and he studied how medical mistakes get made. And he worked with the military too. So he studied a lot about the kind of, I don't know exactly what his research with the military was, but his paper talks about the way that a bunch of different small, seemingly unrelated things can lead up to huge failures. So, saying all of that, I brought that to the board gaming world. So I went to Gene and said, like, hey, why don't we do automated checks? Why don't we do, like, what's our process look like for how we're going to try to eliminate as many mistakes as possible? And so Harold is kind of leading in his question, because he knows, having just gone through this, all the work that we do to try to make sure that the games are perfect. And yet for Flashpoint, we shipped it and there's a mistake in the solo, one of the examples in the solo book. And it's like, well, we did so much, but here it is. So to answer Harold's question directly, because I know people are curious about this, I actually work for GMT. I'm a paid developer for them. I have 2 other paid developers that GMT is investing in, and we continue to look for more people who would like to do development. I'm like right now I'm looking for a Hex Encounter developer who is just super passionate about helping us make our Hex Encounter games perfect. So there's no mistakes. So they come out for the printer and you never have to look for errata counters or anything like that. And but we're also doing all that other stuff, because here's the thing, here's the trick. If you're spending a lot of time thinking about how people are going to learn to play the game, that will help you eliminate a lot of errata. If you spend a lot of time thinking about how the user experience for a game is going to be, that helps you clear up a lot of errata and get rid of clarifications ahead of time so that you don't need them, remove redundant rules, all that kind of stuff. Where I think people fall down is when the designer becomes a one-man show. And it's like, this is my game, I'm marching it to the finish line. Well, again, we're social beings. That's not how things work. So this is why design teams almost always produce better games. This is why getting a really passionate developer alongside a designer helps eliminate so much. And even coming in to do a solitaire system, if you build a solo system, you have another pair of eyes thinking about the critical mechanical things that go into the game, and critically examining the assumptions and finding all these issues and sorting them out before they ever go. So the other thing we're doing is what we're doing for Mr. President. I just want to be clear. We're doing that for like tons of games now. So it's not just Gene saying, hey, I own this company. The 6 of you now have to do what I say. But I have a group of people who do what I call proof testing. So I take a final set of art files. I have them printed at Staples. My local Staples print shop has a copy of my GMT pay stub on file, so that whenever it says copyright GMT, they'll still let me print it. And I take that and I send it to them like a physical copy. And I say, play this. So for Space Corp Ventures, I took that and I sent it to Corey Graham, who was one of the designers of Vijay Nagara. And I was like, play this. Tell me if you find anything. And he found not much, but the stuff they found was stunk. And as far as I know, we have no errata for Ventures at all. Like, it's a clean game.
Nice.
So it can be done, but it needs to be a layered process, because if you just say, I'm going to send this to some people and they're going to proofread it, they won't catch everything. You need those layers.
Well, I can't wait. I've got to order that book, because law enforcement, just a step away from games even, we had a deal. So I'll tell you where we're at now. We used to have a 1.5 mile run that had different times for age groups, because we'll have applicants all the way up into their 40s, and even for male or females. And that was fine. But we recently were struggling with our recruitment for female officers, because a lot of them were having troubles with the run. So they got rid of the run, and there's another system from a bigger city that they liked and they used. But I told the powers that be, I understand why you're doing this, but the run was something that showed it wasn't just, can you do a run? When I first tested to get on, there was a guy who had tried twice before. You could try the run 3 times, and if you failed all 3, you weren't getting hired. And me and another guy went and did our run, did our time, and the lieutenant running it saying, hey, will one of you go pace this guy? This is his last try. So I said, I'll pace him. I'll go run it again. So I'm running with him, and I told him, hey, you're going slow, but if you hold this pace, you'll make it. And 3 laps later, he starts walking. And I said, what? You can't walk. You won't make it. And I got him running again, and then he stopped again. And I said, you got to run. I don't care if you even throw up at this point in time, you're not going to make it. Well, he just walked, and I pulled off and went back. And what I was glad we figured out even then, as a brand new person that wasn't officially hired yet, was he doesn't really want this, or he would have prepped himself or pushed himself. And when we got rid of the run, I told him, I think we're losing a little side thing that I don't know if I could contextualize it, but it's how much do you want this? And that book sounds great, because I think we've got a better process that is very fair. But I always felt like you would see folks show up and who had failed one, and then they came in and smoked it. And it was like, that person wants this. And they almost never failed out of the academy. They never failed out in field training, and they ended up staying on for long periods of time or going into the federal system. So I always thought we're losing something in the mix. So
figuring out ways to do that are like inclusive for people, but also still give you what you need to know. For Gene, it's easy. It's like at GMT, we love new designers and we take a lot of games from new designers. But it's amazing how many games we say yes to, and then they never make it to P500 because the designer just stops. And so, finishing the project, shipping a game is the best sign that we can trust you to do it again.
That is great. Let me see. There was some, we started getting tons of comments.
Yeah, let's go through them. By the way, How Complex Systems Fail is a paper, so it's free.
Okay.
So if you look, it's at how.complexsystems.fail.
Perfect. Mike, evolutionary biology, outstanding. Jeff, we're not meant to code, ? Lead on, man, you just described my typical day at work. Let's see. Like to see the commitment to quality control and process. Big thumbs up from Tim Porter. Absolutely. Mike McKenna here again. Small things leading to huge failure. ? Pearl Harbor, Chosen Reservoir, Vietnam, Iraq. So let's see. We've got Ron coming in. Recommended book, Red Teaming. How your business can conquer the competition by challenging everything. You know this book? You were not.
Yeah, it's a great book. I mean, so for those who don't know, red teams are internal friendlies, right? They work for your company. They're in the same group or the same whatever, but they take the role of an enemy force. And so having people explicitly role play OP4 in any kind of environment, whether it's just somebody coming in and playing devil's advocate and being like, hey, I'm going to pretend that I'm the person opening this box for the first time, and I'm going to tell you all the problems I have with it. Perfect. Or whether, in my field, it's cybersecurity, is super powerful.
Perfect. Yeah, our SWAT guys will do red team when we're doing active shooter. So when you're pushing into a building, like they'll get ready to get rid of an old school, and the school district will say, you guys can go train for active shooter.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they go in, figure out, and these are SWAT guys, and so their level is even higher, and then you have to enter in. And a big thing most good police departments do, they will use simunitions, which shoot tiny little paint balls out of actual guns. I can tell you, I once went past a doorway without proper clearing, and I got stitched up the arm, and oh boy, you won't make that mistake twice. You physically will pay. I literally I came back and there was a detective said, oh my God. I said, yeah, I should have had a long sleeve on because I did not clear.
Got some welts there, huh?
Yeah. Learn from the welts instead of the rounds.
That's right.
Usually what they're yelling at you. So as you come through, Deploribus Rex, I just never understood or understand how you couldn't just get 2 or 3 people all read your prints and catch the errors. Sorry, it continues. Could you pre-publish some content to the community at large and let them catch some errors?
We're doing things like that. So the answer to the first question, I think I've kind of already covered, but like, just imagine it like this. If we made a game and the game was missing a value on a counter, and we just sent this to people who did not know the game, they might never know that value was supposed to be there. Mm-hmm. So like I said, it's a layered thing. I definitely have proofreaders. I have some great proofreaders, and I reuse the same ones because I like them and they have quality output. But they're mostly looking for mistakes in grammar, clarity, punctuation. Some of them who are more involved might actually look at a counter diagram and check all the counters on the counter sheet. But the layer that I'm trusting to figure out, hey, we're missing values on counters, is that testing layer, that proof testing layer, where they're not looking for mistakes in grammar. They're looking for like component issues as they learn the game. So as they're trying to create a mental model of a game, that's where that's going to show up, because they're going to go, wait, the game is telling me this is supposed to be here and it's not. And your brain is like a blinking light when that happens. So
got it. Let me see here. It's funny. I've got my own list, but I want to get to these folks commenting as well. Alan, do you anticipate more political as opposed to pure war focused games like Mr. President?
Yes. I mean, the answer to this is clearly yes. That's where the hobby is kind of starting to gravitate. Games like John Company from Cole Worley, which has like a very heavily political aspect to it. But also prime minister on GMT's P500 right now, which is wrapping up, is another example of a politically focused game. And yes, I expect more.
Very nice. Tim, fresh eyes on the job help to catch mistakes. Absolutely. Harold, better better mustaches in law enforcement. See, I had not pre-read that, Harold. I thought, oh, this will be a great comment, and then it was the mustache.
With Harold, it's 50-50. Which one are you going to get?
Yeah, the funny thing is they had a fundraiser where they let us have beards because the money we paid to be in the it was like No Shave November, I think, all went to I think breast cancer.
Oh, nice.
And then the citizens liked it enough, and it oddly enough, all the younger new officers were like, "Why can't we have beards? You know, what's this reason why we don't?" Which all goes back to World War I, and all those fancy beards and mustaches. You couldn't get a seal from the mustard gas, so the military said shave that, and that became just law enforcement as well.
Fascinating. Did not know that.
Yep, they got it because it's funny. All of our chiefs from like 1875 to 1914, they had mustaches and beards, and and then they just went away. And 100 years later, they're resurfacing. So, yeah, I'm 6'6" with a funky mustache, and don't mind ridicule. So. Every once in a while, somebody's like, ugh. I'm like, yeah, no, it's a little ostentatious. Deploribus Rex, so true. Prepping for being able to run a certain distance. Oh, we're back on is totally within the ability of the person. Right. And, what they were scoring was just a simple time. But what I had recognized and was trying to reinstill was it showed you a bit of character. Would they prep? I almost wish the first run was so hard that a lot of people failed, and then would they come back? How bad do they want it? There was like a little shadow test within the test, and when that guy wouldn't run for 14 and a half minutes, I thought, man, if I get hired here, if I'm in trouble or in big trouble somewhere, and you've got to run, I don't know if I want you trying to come and get me. So, but. Let's see, what do we have here? Harold, Jason, are you going to be at any conventions this year?
Yeah, and I'm always, whenever I go to cons, I'm always working. So if you have a design or a prototype, or you want to talk about game development, that's why I'm there. But I'll be at 2 for the rest of this year. So I'm going to be at GMT Weekend West in Hanford in October. And then in November over Veterans Day, I'm going to be at San Diego Historical Games Convention, which is actually Harold's con. So I'm pretty sure that he just wanted me to pump it for him. But that'll be fun. I think registration for that opens pretty soon. So you're probably going to start seeing tweets and stuff about that. So I'm really excited. I've never been there. So that'll be a lot of fun.
Beautiful. And then Fred popped in with, what if we enjoy errata in our games, though?
I mean, let's put up errata, the board game, on P500, see how many people buy it. I'm going to bet not very many, but hey.
There you go. And then a shot back here. That's only in your games, Fred. And so they're shooting back at each other. Deploribus comes in, wow, I work in healthcare, an increasingly burdened, complex system. I'm going to use your paper to try that you referenced to try to apply it to what we do.
Yeah, great. And just quick dropping in a little bit more there. Richard Cook and John Allspaw are now working together. John Allspaw was the CTO at Etsy for a while, and I think this is kind of their space now. So really interesting stuff there. Got it.
Perfect. Yep. So thank you for your responses, Jason. So let's see, Mike McKenna. Sometimes it's not just reading and proofreading, it's actually playing, using the charts, etc. Absolutely. Here we got, when you're 6'6", ridicule is not a problem. Oh, I don't know about that. You should have seen when I was in high school, what I never wanted to hear. I ate everything I possibly could, and I could not gain past 175. I would eat an entire pizza. Now, I was only 6'4" in high school, but the word skinny seemed like a terrible curse word to me. You're so skinny. And I'd be like, oh, I
felt like that way.
Yeah. No, unfortunately, my dad kept telling me, enjoy it while you can. When you turn 35,
Doesn't work anymore.
Yep,
Yeah.
and he didn't lie, but yeah, I felt like the old sales pitch in the back of the comic book where I needed to go like lift weights so I didn't get sand kicked in my
Right.
face. So yeah, so yeah, 6'6" meant I had to get used to standing out in a crowd, which isn't always easy when you're that teenager.
Yeah.
I definitely don't have a problem standing out in the crowd any longer. So Jeff, GMT's errata, just the mistakes, nothing else.
I don't know if Gene will pick that one up. I think that might be a bridge too far for him.
Great reference. Tim, it's only errata. It's only errata is it's from the errata region of France. Otherwise, it's just a sparkling air.
Got to be careful to file a lawsuit.
That's right. Now, while we're on the solitaire games, I did want to bring up it's Napoleon.
Yeah.
Yes. So,
yeah.
And I've seen some stuff. I haven't dove in too far. Napoleonic's not really the era I spent a lot of time with, but right away I was like, what do we have going on here? Can you fill in some things there?
Yeah, I'm not going to say too much about it.
Okay.
I'm not the one who is doing the development for it, but I think it's an interesting type of game because it crosses that line between a role-playing game and like what we consider a historical war game. So you are Napoleon, right? You're not like there's not a Napoleon counter that you're moving around. You are Napoleon, and so you're judged on your legacy as Napoleon. And there's sort of a historical benchmark that is relatively high to be as notorious and illustrious as, or notorious or illustrious, I don't know, as Napoleon.
Good.
So Ken Kuhn is doing the development on that one, and obviously Ted, just legendary designer. So I really expect that one's going to be phenomenal. And as I understand it, we just kind of wrapped up development on that, so it's going into art right now. And
nice.
Pretty excited to get that on tables. And I think this is a trend. I think there's a lot of games. I've been playing games that are kind of like that. A simple example of something that has really drawn me in is Spire's End. So I don't know if anybody's played that, but it's a role-playing adventure game where you are the survivor of this calamity, and there's this spire that you have to journey into to try to figure out what happened and see if anybody is alive. And it's just a deck of cards. Like, they're in order. And you play the game by flipping the cards over and resolving what's on each card. And occasionally you get to make almost like a choose your own adventure style decision. And it's like, if you do this, go to card 50. If you do this, go to card 65. And you miss whatever's in between. That story doesn't happen because you made a choice. And so it has some playability. You can play it a couple times. It's also brutally hard. So you will die in the first 30 cards almost every time you play. And you have to learn what's coming so that the next time you play, you know how to beat it. Sure. And so that's not for everybody, but those types of role-playing experiences, I think, are becoming more popular. And Napoleon is kind of a bigger, more grandiose, involved, crazier version of that. And, at the beginning, you mentioned Purple Haze, which is, again, that same style of game. And so I think those are becoming more and more popular. I certainly enjoy them because, like you were saying, I mean, everybody wants to play. Like, why did people play B-17 back in the day, right? Because there's this story of your crew, and it's fun to get your plane lands, but it's like shot up so badly you can't believe that you made it. And this is sort of the modern version of that, I think.
See, that's great. Yeah, I always, when they came out with the newer version of B-17, they got rid of the simple 8.5 by 11 map with the green to white. And I thought, no. There was something about distance conveyed there. And when I would be 6 zones out and I've lost an engine, but I know I can dump my bombs and I can maybe make it back. And then, like you're saying, it just somehow felt like it was that bridge too far. It was just like, we're never going to make it. And then you get through a zone and then but God forbid you fall out of formation and now you're getting swarmed. And it's like, oh my God. And the tension would wrap, but that one map, I think, is so crucial because that counter just seems so far away. And it was amazing when I saw that. I thought, oh, I don't want just a line that I'm moving my counter up and back.
Right.
I could see other cities. I could see, when do we get into France? When am I back in fighter cover? And yeah, it was that one map was just huge.
And I think, it gives you a feeling of time and place. Like
Right.
that's super important. And no, for I Napoleon, you have a map of all of Europe. And so, you're putting cards out into different spaces on that map to show, again, kind of the same thing. It's like, I don't have a Russia track that I'm moving things on. Like I'm actually putting cards into that space.
Perfect.
To give the sense of scope of what's going on in the world.
Perfect. Yeah, I got so lucky with B-17 because I was, for whatever reason, I loved World War II history and I'd become an avid reader. And I thought, oh, I love the B-17. I knew the crew positions and I bought the game based on that knowledge. But the attachment you formed to crew and to the plane, the same way, Star Trek attaches you to the Enterprise, and the USS Constitution held this like it's a living, breathing being. That ability that the human brain does, and then for the game to do that as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can't say too much, but like definitely something coming in that vein from GMT soon. And if you're into science fiction, it's probably going to make you happy.
See, we're going to have you back on soon. That's wow. And now
this is how it works, right? You bring me on, I say something at the end when we're almost out of time, and you're like, well, I guess we have to have you come back.
Yeah, he's going to have to return. What do you think? 6 months we hear more on this? This sounds intriguing on the sci-fi.
Let's say 6 months. Let's say 6 months.
All right. Very good. Let me look. We'll get some more comments coming in here. Let's see. Where did I drop off? Here we go. I think from Mike, any old SPI games or Avalon Hill worthy of a redesign in your opinion?
I think for me, the game that I'm most interested in right now is Raid on Saint Nazaire. So, it's a really interesting design. It's super evocative. It's a lot of fun, but man, my wrist hurts when I'm done setting that game up. Like so many die rolls, and it just is like, I feel like there's something there. And, that's probably the one that jumps out to me the most right now. Okay. I would also love to see somebody go back and do, this is a Victory Games, but Mosby's Raiders. That's just another one that I feel like with the way that we've evolved our treatments of insurgency and counterinsurgency in wargaming since that game came out, we could do a lot better treatment of the topic that was a little bit more honest and a little bit less like that game feels a little bit like it's making a mythology, if you know what I'm saying. I feel like we could do a little better, but it's a great game and it's so much fun. So that's not meant as a shot at the game as much as it is just, if I was updating it, I would really want to see somebody tackle the questions of like raiding in war and what is amazingly difficult about portraying that is doing justice to like the harm it does to civilians, but the benefit it does to the war, and asking questions about total war and what it means. And that game could do that.
Perfect. Little shot here. Fred Serval is Napoleon.
Reincarnated. Yes. Napoleon the fifth, maybe. I think the fourth might have died in infancy.
There you go. Let's see. So messing up rules. So you got the notification a little late. You'll definitely want to go back and watch from the beginning. Of course, this will be posted there. So you can go back and kind of see as we drop through things. So Kabuki Kid, she is in. She's late to the party. I was
wondering where you were.
I know. Here we go. Hi, Chief. Hi, Jason. Chat gang. Let's see. So we've got that sounds cool. And I'm sorry, messing up rules. I don't know. It must be I Napoleon.
I think it was the science fiction comment.
Okay.
I think that came in right there.
Yeah, the sci-fi solitaire game. Compliment to a game if it gives you carpal tunnel from dice rolling. Perfect.
Well, Raid on Saint Nazaire might do that to you.
It might. Beautiful map.
I love the map. The map. I wouldn't change the map at all. Maybe make it a little bigger, but
yeah, Charlie's map is just gorgeous there.
Well, if I can just say, I love working with Charlie. He is the best.
I think he was the very first Avalon Hill interview I did, where I thought I need to interview more folks in that time because, Charlie's maps were just. I mean. Boy, you could just stare at the map. I remember thinking, this is like photo quality. This is amazing. This is Let's see. Top 5. Here we go. So top 5 GMT games. Do you want to? I know you're connected in with so many. Is that an unfair
where to even
question?
start? If I'm not, so I mean, I'm sorry. Harold's still here, right? So number 1 is Flashpoint South China Sea by Harold.
There you
Buchanan.
go. There you go.
Let me think. So Fire in the Lake is probably my number 1. I really love Fire in the Lake. It's one of my favorite games. I worked on the expansion Fall of Saigon, which I also love. And there's just something about that game that does it for me. Wilderness War, as I mentioned, is possibly my favorite game of all time.
Really?
Volko Runka, and it's just so good. And I love the way that it portrays raiding. One of the things in the design notes, I just reread the design notes because I was like, I want to remind myself of what Volko was doing. And one of the things that's mentioned there is that it's not a war. He wanted to show that it's not just a war of like these channels. It wasn't just like, well, there's the Hudson River Valley, and then there's like, he wanted to show more that it was more dynamic than that, and that frontier raiding was this huge part of it. And so I kind of see a straight line between what he did in Wilderness War, what he eventually did in Labyrinth, and then eventually the Coin series. There's a lot of irregular warfare themes in what Volko does, and that's I really enjoy those games. Let's see. I'm a big sucker for Sekigahara. That's one of my favorite games as well. Really great. I don't like block games that much, but I love Sekigahara. So that one would probably be up there.
As a game, that's just a great story in and of itself. I know a buddy of mine here that started a game group, had that on P500, and it was there for a long, long time. And then when it finally funded and came through, it kind of, I don't think it blew up right away, but it just started to like a slow burn, and then just boom, all of a sudden everybody was talking about it. And I thought, man, I played that 3 years ago, and and now what it's getting ready, is it its 3rd reprinting, or is the second fourth reprinting?
There's games that we have that we'll print once or twice. Then there's games that we're going to print pretty much forever. And I think that game has finally crossed over into the forever camp. So let me see.
Sorry.
Was that 3? I think that was 3.
Yeah, I think
I'll throw 2 more out there. I don't know if these top 5 is really hard, but I would say another one for me is Normandy 44, which is one of my favorite, probably my favorite of the Simonich 40 series games.
Okay.
Although Salerno 43 is really good. If people have not played that, the whole puzzle of trying to figure out how the U.S. lands and gets up into the mountains, and as the defenders trying to figure out where you put your units to slow that down is really, really satisfying. And then I'll say Dominant Species as my last one, because I do love Dominant Species.
Okay, very nice. Throughout here, Fire in the Lake, Empire of the Sun, Versailles 1919, Twilight Struggle, and U.S. Civil War.
Great list.
Very nice.
And then honorable mention to 1846. So if people have not played the 18XX games, they blew me away. I was shocked. I thought it was going to be this really dry stock trading thing, and Ken Kuhn basically forced me to go to Trax in Denver, which is a 18XX con, and he taught me how to play 1846, and I was just like, oh, this is a war game with train clothes. Like, you're laying tiles, you're blocking people, you're sabotaging them, you're dropping shares into the stock market to tank their stock price. Like, it is exceptionally high conflict. So I dug it. I was
interesting.
So I almost immediately bought all 3. I think 1862 is the best one that we make. It's a tough starting point. But I'm so excited about what's coming in our 18XX pipeline. I can't say anything, but I'm so excited.
Wow.
We got good stuff coming.
Well, Kabuki Kid agrees. Yeah. She was skeptical of 18XX games, but she was drawn into and has played tons now. That's interesting, because I usually had steered away from the train games as well.
Well, and the best part is you can play them online. 18xx.games has a great implementation of all 3 of the games. 1848 Australia is in alpha, but all the games that we've published are up there, and it's a great implementation. You can learn, play online. There's a big community, so there's no excuse not to play them.
And a good place to get closer to our wrap up here, which is Messing Up Rules. He says it could be any 5 from GMT in the last 10 years or so. Very good point. Anything. I want to be respectful of your time as well, Jason, although I could have you on. We could go for like a Joe Rogan 3 hour, but we want to make sure people come in and watch again and post. But anything you wanted to add, or I've missed, or that I skipped over on my little crib sheet over here?
So the only thing we didn't talk about that you promised everybody we were going to talk about is my game. So
that is true.
Let's wrap with this here. So I just did a solo design for Jason Matthews for Twilight Struggle Red Sea. So if you like Twilight Struggle and you want to play it in an hour, this is the game. And Perfect. It has a solo system. And so doing the solo system was really, actually, it's probably the biggest challenge I've ever taken on. I mentioned in the Flashpoint South China Sea design notes that I pretty much designed the solo system for South China Sea in one evening. And then I was like, no, this is too simple. And I set it aside and I worked for like 6 months to try to make a better solo system. But I just ended up making it worse. And so I just went back to where I started. And that's a version of that is what shipped with the game.
Cool.
And it's been really well received. So I learned a lot through that process. And when I approached Twilight Struggle Red Sea, I thought, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to keep it really simple and very clean and like not try to simulate rules and all that kind of stuff. And it was impossible. It was absolutely impossible. And so I took a step back and I said, what makes Twilight Struggle great? Why is it, again, coming back to that thought of like, your turn needs to be the same and the opponent's turn needs to be as simple as possible. How do you do that? Well, for Twilight Struggle, I kind of thought about it a lot. And I think everybody thinks of Twilight Struggle and says the core of the game is when you play your opponent's event, it happens. And you have to figure out how to mitigate that impact. And so I got a lot of pushback on my bot because the very first thing that I figured out with the bot is that I was not going to have the opponent trigger your events. And people were like, well, that destroys the heart of the game. I would encourage people to try this because I think they're wrong. I think the heart of the game is looking at your 9 cards and going, or 8 cards and going, how am I going to get out of this? Right? Like I've got 4 of their events that will utterly destroy me in a scoring card. What do I do? And how am I going to get out of this? And the bot lets you still have that exact same experience. You're still giving them the events, but the way that the bot stays competitive is that it doesn't. And so, you know, there's a whole bunch of UX work that went into that and everything, but I'm really proud of it. And I think people are really going to enjoy it.
Perfect.
And I will say, working with Jason Matthews was a treat. And so I got to dig into the internals of this system and really pull it apart. And I learned so much about Twilight Struggle I did not understand before. I'm still terrible at it, but like I understand it. I saw the Matrix, you know? And and so I had been working on a game design on the Cuban Missile Crisis at the time I was working on that. And the more I got into it, the more I said, man, this would be a really great Twilight Struggle game.
Nice.
And so I have Twilight Struggle Cuban Missile Crisis, which is perpetually 3 months from P500. Like for a long time, Gene had it like on his list, and every month he would just move it down one. And finally, I was like, I'm too busy. Like postpone this for a little while. So I don't know when it'll see light of day, but it is on my table. It is a functional game design, and it really evokes. I'm using a lot of modern. So the Soviet archives have been unsealed. And so there's a lot of really interesting stuff coming out of out of the former USSR archives that are showing us more about what Khrushchev thought. And so my game is trying to show not just the American narrative of this, but like a bigger picture of like, there's a really great story about the Cuban Missile Crisis that years later, decades later, like in the 90s, Kennedy's Secretary of Defense, McNamara, McNamara went to a conference where a bunch of the former Cuban Missile Crisis people, the personas from that, were there, and he was talking. I think it was Khrushchev's son who he was talking to, and there was a comment made offhand. It's like, well, it's a good thing your U.S. soldiers didn't invade because we had tactical nuclear weapons pointed at the beach, and McNamara is just like sitting there blinking. Because he didn't know that. And it was the 90s. So I think there's a lot of stuff there to unpack now that we kind of know more of the story and show just how unwilling both Khrushchev and Kennedy were to push the nuclear button and how much they went through to try to avoid pushing the nuclear button. And The real crazy part is that we came so close to nuclear war because of how complex systems fail. Just to bring us full circle here for a second.
Perfect.
It wasn't that Khrushchev or Kennedy was going to order a strike. It was that a U-2 got lost coming back from the North Pole and accidentally flew over Soviet space. It was that a U-2 got shot down by a Cuban commander in over Cuba, and that almost caused nuclear flashpoint. It was because a submarine didn't surface to get a radio message and thought practice depth charges were real depth charges and tried to launch their nuclear weapon. And the only reason they couldn't is because there was a third officer on that boat who overrode them. Like, just crazy stories. And I want to tell those stories and show that Kennedy and Khrushchev weren't trying to prevent, the big button push. They were trying to control a whole bunch of forces that were almost out of control.
Perfect. We had a couple comments on that coming in. Ron was 7 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He remembers duck and cover. Yeah. I knew living up in the mountains of Evergreen, there were some folks that were living there. There would tell you, well, the way the breezes work and being this far up, when Denver's nuked, we won't have the fallout. And I'd go, God dang.
The fact that that is terrifying, right?
Yeah. They were like, this is the level and the wind will blow it this way. And I was like, wow. And then you would hear, they had a bunker. And I was like, goodness. So, people were, I'm trying to pull up this one. 13 days definitely scratches an itch. 13 minutes fits in your back pocket. Yeah. And it sounds like what you've got going on is going to enlighten a lot of folks on some knowledge they didn't know too.
Yeah. And I think, I want to be really clear. People ask me, why are you doing this? 13 days already exists. 13 days is a different game. It's showing it's showing Cuba as a flashpoint in a geopolitical competition. It is the same story as Twilight Struggle, but it's cut to this one moment in time. My game is not. My game is Cuba and what was going on in Cuba. And why did Khrushchev think he could take advantage of Kennedy this way? And Kennedy having to grow a spine, basically, and figure out how to fight back without being steamrolled. And the misunderstanding culturally. Khrushchev thought there's no way the U.S. will do anything because putting missiles in Cuba doesn't change anything. We still have ICBMs pointed at D.C. This changes nothing. But Kennedy, understanding the political situation in the United States, that it was untenable for him to allow missiles in Cuba, had a different perspective. And so that misunderstanding is what caused the entire thing. And 13 days doesn't directly get into that. So I think that it'll be a welcome thing to have next to it on your shelf, hopefully.
Yes, here's Chief Rocky Flats. Yes, was just down the hill from you. It would have been one of the first to get nuked. Right. Yeah, the whole deal was winds. I learned a whole thing about winds. And it is true that the danger sometimes is that like a blizzard will get stuck in that area and it'll come around twice and hit you with 3 feet of snow. But yeah, trust me, living up where I lived would have been terrible in any kind of nuclear winter. So I was always like, I don't know if being up here would be the best place to be.
The funny part about that is people would study prevailing winds and they would be like, oh, that wind doesn't blow this way, I'll be fine living here. They forget that when a nuclear weapon gets dropped, it changes the weather patterns for quite some time because of the amount of heat. And so, you get this vortex and swirling, and it's not the wind blows this way, so all the fallout goes that way.
Yeah. I think I mentioned nuclear winter once, and I'm like, 7 years? Was the bunker that warm? And they were like hey, don't ruin my image of survival.
Don't poop on their their idea there.
Yeah, I was just a kid. I was a dumb kid. Hey, whatever. So, well, perfect. I think we're gonna a few more have come in on Cheyenne Mountain and some things down by you.
Yeah, I can see Cheyenne Mountain out my window. So.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, again, great. We could go on for hours. Always a pleasure to have you on anytime you want to come on. And we've got the teaser whenever the sci-fi solitaire game is ready to get some more information. Let me know.
I'll bring the designer with me. We'll do it together.
Oh, look at that. Look at that. Well, he'll bring the designer.
It's not me. Somebody else.
Nope. Okay. I love it. All right. We're going to go ahead and end. Let me hit end broadcast. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And for
Thanks, everybody.
all the wonderful questions. Perfect. All right. Well, why